Have you ever opened a bottle of mead, taken the first sip, and thought, okay, what happened here? Maybe it was good, maybe it was too sweet, maybe it was too thin, maybe it had a hot alcohol burn, maybe it tasted flat, or maybe it was just not what you thought you were making. And that's really the problem. Most beginner mead makers don't know why a batch turned out the way it did. They follow a recipe, they wait 3 months, maybe 6 months, sometimes longer. Then they taste it and they're left guessing. Was it the honey? Was it the yeast? Was it the fruit? Was it the sweetness? Was it the fermentation? Was it the alcohol? And if you've been there, let me know in the comments what you're fighting right now. Too sweet, too thin, too hot, too flat, or just not repeatable. Because that's what I want to help you fix in this video. Not by turning it into some boring style lecture, not by making you memorize a bunch of mead names, and not by acting like every mead fits perfectly into one neat little box. I want you to start thinking about mead styles in a much more useful way. Think of them as targets. Before you make a batch, you need to know what you're aiming for. Because once you know the target, you stop hoping the mead turns out good. You start making choices on purpose. Mead sounds simple. Honey, water, yeast, thyme. That's the basic idea. But that simple starting point can turn into a lot of different things. It can be light and crisp. It can be rich and sweet, dry and clean, fruit forward, spiced, caramelized, sparkling, still, low alcohol, strong, or sometimes completely experimental. So the style name is not really the whole lesson. The better question is this: what is the mead supposed to do in the glass? If it tastes thin, what should give it more body? If it tastes too hot, what should support the alcohol? And if it tastes flat, what should give it some lift? If the fruit disappears, what should bring it back? That's how I want you to look at mead styles, not as vocabulary words. Look at them as clues. A style helps you understand what should be the main character, what should support it, and what should stay in the background. Let's start with the easiest one to understand, but honestly, one of the hardest ones to make well: traditional mead. Traditional mead is honey, water, and yeast. That's it, and that sounds easy. But that's exactly what makes it hard, because there's nowhere to hide. There's no blackberry covering up a weak fermentation. There's no cinnamon distracting you from a thin body. There's no malt, maple, coffee, oak, or fruit doing any of the heavy lifting. The honey has to carry the drink, so the honey matters a lot. Orange blossom honey can give you that bright, floral, almost citrus-like character. Buckwheat can be darker, earthy, and rich. Meadow foam can bring those soft vanilla and marshmallow-like notes. Clover, wildflower, and tupelo, they all take the mead in a different direction. So before you ever add fruit, spice, oak, or anything else, the honey is already shaping that final mead. And this is where a lot of beginners make the wrong fix. They taste a traditional mead and think, this is thin, this is hot, this tastes empty. So they assume the answer is just more honey next time. Sometimes that helps, but a lot of times the real problem is not just the amount of honey. It might be balance. Maybe the alcohol is too sharp for the body. Maybe the mead finished too dry for the strength. Maybe it needs acid to wake it up. Maybe it needs tannin to give it a grip. Maybe the fermentation wasn't clean enough, so the honey character never really had a chance to show up. That's why traditional mead teaches you so much. It forces you to ask a better question. Not just, what ingredient is missing? The better question is, what part of the balance is missing? Now, let's talk about sweetness, because this is one of the biggest places mead makers get surprised. Dry, semi-sweet, and sweet are not ingredients. They describe how sweet the mead feels when you drink it. And dry does not mean boring. Dry does not mean thin. Dry does not mean flavorless. A good dry mead can still have aroma, body structure, and honey character. So if your dry mead tastes like watered-down white wine, the problem is not simply that it's dry. The problem might be that it doesn't have enough body, or acid, or tannin, or honey character. Or maybe the fermentation stripped out what you wanted to keep. Semi-sweet gives you a little more room. It can help the honey show up more clearly without making the mead feel heavy. That's why semi-sweet is often a good target for newer mead makers. But semi-sweet does not mean you just leave some sugar behind and call it done. If it tastes dull, it may need acid. If it tastes soft and lifeless, it may need tannin. If the honey tastes buried, maybe the honey choice wasn't strong enough. Or maybe the fermentation wasn't clean enough. Or maybe there are too many other ingredients fighting for attention. And then you have sweet mead. Sweet mead should be sweet, obviously. But sweet mead doesn't mean syrup. A good sweet mead still needs structure. The sweetness should support the honey. It should not just cover the whole drink like a blanket. Acid helps keep sweet mead from feeling heavy. Tannin gives it shape. Alcohol gives it warmth. And body gives it fullness. So when someone says, my mead is too sweet, the fix isn't always make it drier. Sometimes the fix is to balance the sweetness. Now, let's talk about strength. This is where a lot of harsh meads begin. Hydromel, standard mead, and sack mead are mostly about alcohol strength. A hydromel is a lighter mead, lower alcohol, easy drinking, refreshing, and it can be great in warm weather. Hydromels also really work well with carbonation, but they have less room for mistakes. If the honey is weak, it could taste watery. If the acid is off, it could taste flat. If the carbonation doesn't fit, the whole thing could feel disconnected. So the goal is not just make it low alcohol. The goal is light, balanced, refreshing, and still clearly mead. Then you have standard strength mead. This is probably the one most people think of when they hear mead. But standard strength doesn't tell you the whole story. A standard dry traditional mead and a standard semi-sweet berry melomel are both standard strength meads, but they're not trying to be the same drink. One might be focused on honey character. The other might be focused on fruit, acidity, color, and sweetness. Same strength, different target. Then you have sack mead, the stronger category. And this is where balance matters even more. A sack mead can be rich, full, warming, and complex. But if the alcohol is not supported, it can taste hot. That's when people start saying it tastes like rocket fuel. And here's the thing, strong doesn't automatically mean good. Strong mead needs enough body, sweetness, honey character, acid, tannin, and sometimes age to carry that alcohol. Also, sack mead does not automatically mean sweet. It can be dry, semi-sweet, or sweet. But a lot of stronger meads do benefit from some sweetness because sweetness can help support the alcohol warmth and honey depth. That's not a rule, that's balance. So now you already have three major targets. Sweetness tells you how sweet the mead feels. Strength tells you how much alcohol and weight the mead has. Strength tells you how much alcohol and weight the mead has to carry. And carbonation changes how all of that lands on your palate. And carbonation matters more than people think. It's not just bubbles. Carbonation can make a mead feel lighter. It can make sweetness feel less heavy. It can lift aroma. It can sharpen the finish. And it can make a hydromel feel bright and refreshing. But it also can expose problems. If the mead is thin, bubbles can make it feel even thinner. If the acid is already sharp, carbonation can make it feel sharper. If the sweetness and body don't support the bubbles, the whole mead can feel out of balance. So don't think of carbonation as something you just throw in at the end because sparkling sounds fun. Still, petulant and sparkling are part of the target. And if this way of thinking is already helping you see your next batch more clearly, take a second to like and subscribe. That helps me keep making these videos for the mead making community. Now, let's talk about the part where mead styles usually start sounding like a dictionary. Fruit meads, spice meads, malt meads, maple meads, caramelized honey meads, coffee meads, pepper meads, historical meads, cultural meads. It can get confusing fast. But again, you don't need to memorize every name first. You need to understand what the ingredient is doing. Let's start with fruit. A melomel is made with fruit, but that description is too simple because fruit does more than add flavor. Fruit can add acid, tannin, color, aroma, structure, depth. That's why fruit can help a mead that tastes flat. Raspberry can bring sharp brightness. Blackberry can bring dark fruit color and tannin. Cherry can bring acidity and structure. Peach can bring softness and aroma. Apple can bring acidity, tannin, and that cider-like impression. Grape can bring a more wine-like structure. So instead of treating Melomel, Sizer, Pymet, Morat, and black mead like flashcards, ask a better question. What is the fruit doing? A Sizer uses apple or apple juice. So the apple should make sense with the honey. A Pymet uses grapes. So the grape character should work with the honey, not crush it. Morat is commonly used for mulberry mead. Black mead is commonly used for black currant mead, though naming traditions can vary. The name helps, but the bigger question is more useful. Is fruit adding brightness, structure, color, aroma, tannin? Is it helping the honey or is it covering the honey up? That's the part that helps you make better mead. Now, let's say your mead has enough body, but it needs more character. That's where spices, herbs, flowers, and peppers can help. But this is also where people can mess up a batch really fast. A metheglin uses spices or herbs, and the danger is that spice could take over before you realize it. Cinnamon can add warmth, but too much can taste woody and harsh. Vanilla can add softness, but too much can taste fake. Ginger can add brightness, but too much can dominate the whole glass. That's how you get what I call the potpourri mistake. The mead stops tasting like mead. Now it tastes like a scented candle. So don't ask, how much spice can I get away with? Ask, what job is the spice doing? Is it adding warmth, aroma, contrast, balance, a better finish? Or is it becoming the only thing anyone can taste? The same thing applies to pepper meads, rose meads, and spice grape meads.
A capsicum mill
Uses chili peppers, but the heat should support the mead. It should not punish the person drinking it. A rotomel can use rose character, but floral notes can go from beautiful to perfume or soap really fast. A Hippocras style mead can bring grape or spice together, but grape, spice, and honey still have to taste like one drink. Every ingredient sounds exciting before you add it, but once it's in the mead, it has a job. If it supports the target, great. If it doesn't, it becomes noise. Now let's say your mead tastes thin, simple, or one-dimensional. That's where malt, caramelized honey, maple, coffee, oak, or age can bring more depth. A braggot brings malt into the mead, but the goal is harmony. If it tastes only like beer, the honey disappeared. If it tastes like mead with random malt sweetness thrown in, the malt probably doesn't belong yet. Boucher uses caramelized or heated honey. That can bring deeper flavors, like caramel, toasted sugar, marshmallow, toffee, darker cooked sugar notes. But if you push that honey too far, or you don't balance it, those same flavors could turn burnt, harsh, or muddy. An metheglin uses maple syrup or maple character. Maple could add richness and depth, but maple could also step right over the honey. A coffee mill can bring roast, bitterness, aroma, and depth, but coffee can become harsh very quickly and also have notes of herbaceousness. So, once again, the style name is not the whole lesson. The lesson is what the ingredient does to the balance. Fruit can brighten the mead and add structure. Spice could add warmth or become harsh. Malt can add grain depth or hide honey. Caramelized honey can add cooked sugar depth or turn muddy. Maple could add richness or overpower the honey. Coffee can add roast and bitterness and become sharp, herbaceous, and distracting. That's why the target matters. There are also cultural and historical meads, and I think these are important because they remind us that mead is bigger than one modern recipe style. Tej is the Ethiopian honey wine traditionally associated with gesho, which can bring bitterness and herbal character. Polish meads are often described by honey and water ratios. Polcharak is very rich, around 2 parts honey to 1 part water. I can't pronounce this one. Dvorzniak is about 1 part honey to 1 part water. Troziak is about 1 part honey to 2 parts water. Schwiziak is about 1 part honey to 3 parts water. Sorry for bastardizing these names, but those names are not just for decoration. They point to a tradition. They tell you something about the kind of result the maker is aiming for. Some meads are light and fresh. Some are rich and sweet. Some are strong and long-aged. Some are herbal. Some are built around fruit, spice, malt, and caramelized honey. Once you start seeing that, the names stop feeling like a wall of vocabulary. They become clues. They tell you what the maker was trying to create. And the same thing is true with numbers. Numbers help, but numbers do not replace your palate. Specific gravity, or SG, measures how dense the liquid is compared to water. In mead, that density mostly comes from dissolved sugar, from honey, and other fermentable ingredients. Original gravity, or OG, is the reading before fermentation. That helps you estimate potential alcohol because it tells you how much fermentable sugar you started with. Final gravity, or FG, is the reading after fermentation. That helps you show how much sugar is left. But here's the trap. Final gravity does not perfectly tell you how sweet the mead will taste. The hydrometer gives you a number. It does not tell you if the mead is balanced. It does not tell you if the acid is too low. It does not tell you if the tannin is missing. It does not tell you if your alcohol feels hot. It does not tell you if the fruit and honey actually work together. So use gravity numbers. They are important. They help you understand what happened. They help you plan a batch. They help you repeat a batch. They help you describe a mead more clearly. But the glass gets the final note. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had a gravity reading that looked right, but the mead still tasted wrong? That happens all the time. And that's usually when balance matters more than the number. So here's a simple way to use all this before your next batch. Don't start by asking, what's the fanciest style name? Start by asking, what do I actually want in this glass? Do I want it light or strong? Dry or sweet? Still or sparkling? Do I want the honey to be the star? Do I want fruit, spice, malt, maple, caramelized honey, coffee, pepper, rose, something else? Then ask the real balance question. What does that choice do? Fruit may add acid and tannin. Spice may add warmth or may become harsh. Carbonation may make the mead feel lighter. Sweetness may support the alcohol warmth. Tannin may give the mead structure. Acid may keep it from tasting flat. And now you're not just following a recipe. You're calling the shots. You're deciding the target before fermentation starts. And that's how good mead becomes more repeatable. And that's how you stop making surprise batches. And that's how mead-style language becomes useful instead of confusing. Remember the first questions. Maybe your mead tasted perfect. Maybe it tasted too sweet, too thin, too hot, too flat, or just different from what you expected. Either way, the goal is to understand why. Once you know the target, you could repeat what worked, and you could fix what didn't. And that's what separates a random batch from an intentional one. And if you want to keep building your mead making skills, check out my other mead making videos over here. I break down beginner fermentation mistakes, how to balance sweetness, acid, and tannin. I also link my free ebook, Mead Making at Home Easily, in the description below. It will help you get started with your first or next batch. Because mead making gets a lot easier when you understand the target before the batch becomes a surprise. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Happy mead making.